Medical Mariner Inc.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you live from our Norfolk studio, home of the Atlantic Fleet, Medical Mariner Inc.
Hello and welcome to Medical Mariner Inc. I'm your host, Paul Stewart. This podcast is going to cover my journey in life, some things I have learned. We will talk about medicine, about PA school, about changing careers, about tattoos and scuba diving, technical diving. Might even talk about skydiving in there, growing things, resilient living, training, anything else that comes to mind. I will attempt to get some folks on here now and then to talk about things with us, and we'll see where this journey goes. Thanks for listening, and now here's today's episode. Hello and welcome. Thanks for checking in and listening. I'm your host, Paul Stewart, and today's episode of Medical Mariner Inc. is called Knowing Why. In this episode, we're going to discuss why it's important to know why you're setting off on an undertaking, why you're there while it's going on, so that you can use that to stay motivated while you're doing something, especially while you're doing something that takes a long time and also something that is fairly difficult. Now, when you're trying to understand your why for motivation, we're not going to get into true motivational theory here. We're not going to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs or any of that formal education stuff. Really, I just want to get to the bottom of sometimes where I have found it important to look back on why I am doing something and use that to keep me going, and hopefully you'll be able to use some of that too. I also will touch on some times when maybe I didn't really understand my why behind doing things, and that led to some early challenges. The first thing I want to talk about with knowing why is a situation where I didn't really understand why. I actually did make a few early runs at college education when I first started out. I did a brief time at Eastern Carolina University and some time at Virginia Commonwealth University. Neither of those was very successful. The main reason being I was pretty much just taking college classes because that is the thing that I thought you were supposed to do after you finished high school. I think there is a lot of that messaging that is popular in American culture today, and there's likely quite a few lines of employment and career paths out there that don't need as much of a focus on formal education, and you can do just fine at those, and some people make a ton of money doing those. So if you are going to set out on an educational path and you decide that you have an area of study, it's important that you know why you're choosing both of those, both choosing to go down a formal education path and choosing an area of study, because that will be important in keeping you on track and knowing what you need to do to finish it. Now, I want to contrast this with some later forays into education I made, the first being my associate's degree. If you'll recall from the previous episode, I was discussing that I did my first associate's degree in computer programming because that seemed to be where the jobs were. As part of that education, I had to start with an algebra class because I had not paid attention to math at all in high school. That was always kind of funny to me when I was doing construction, because in construction, you're doing applied geometry problems all day long, every day. And here we were, the crew of guys who hadn't paid any attention in high school, and we were doing those applied geometry problems all day long, every day. But I digress. So when I got into that algebra class, the math just was not coming to me intuitively. It was actually taking me hours, sometimes more than 5 or 6 hours a day, to get it down and understand and make things work. I hadn't built those pathways in my brain yet. I'm really happy I had the instructor I did because she was patient. She worked with me, especially when she saw I was struggling, and sat down with me and was like, look, maybe you just need to get those hours in and spend some time doing this, because that's the only way you're going to get through and get to the next parts of your education. When she did that, that kept me motivated to stay in that algebra class, because I knew I needed it to finish what I was doing, and I wasn't going to be able to get into that career path I was looking for if I didn't finish. I actually one day had that, it just clicked, and algebra was easy after that. I went on to do advanced math courses, 3 semesters of calculus, getting into multivariable differential calculus. Also went on to do things like matrix algebra and numerical analyses. I had to stay motivated to get through that first one. And there were other parts of that associate's degree that I wasn't particularly interested in doing. However, understanding I needed to do them to get through my degree path is what it took to get things done, and getting through that degree path is what I needed to get into the career field that I had chosen. My other educational experiences, first for my bachelor's degree, that I got because it was something that my mentor, Mark Dunn, had identified as a gap in my resume and something I needed to have completed to keep going. Now, trying to do a bachelor's degree, finish that up, even when you have some of it done, even when it's online, it's still tedious and has some difficult moments. So I had to keep in mind that I really need to focus and finish this so that I've got that particular thing checked off that box, so it will no longer be a barrier to me in any kind of advancement. Another thing that kept me going was I had to pay for it up front, and then the company would reimburse me for it, but only if I got an A or a B in the class. So that also motivated me to do very well. After my bachelor's degree, I did go on and get an MBA because I thought that would help me with management track stuff in business. Also thought it might help push my sales game a little harder. Turns out it didn't necessarily offer me a whole lot in either of those areas, but it has helped me a lot in some of the small businesses and other things I've done on the side. Having that MBA and getting through that MBA, I needed to keep in mind that focus, that why of I thought it was going to help me improve my career. Even though it didn't necessarily, it was still good knowledge to have, and it did help me in the long run. Understanding why I was there, that it was another thing I needed for advancement, was what helped me get through it and make it happen. Now, my last educational opportunity before I got into PA school was when I had to complete the prerequisite courses to get into PA school. We will go through this material when we do the PA school episode. However, what I needed to do was go back and complete courses that you needed to have before you could even apply to PA school, like chemistry, biology, organic chemistry, biochemistry. Turns out a lot of those were really fun courses, except for organic chemistry. That course, it's just painful. Even people who really understand things like that well, I believe, find that one painful. However, keeping in mind that I had to do these things to get into PA school kept me going and kept me getting through those prerequisites. Also had a big motivation to get high grades, because you need to have a minimum grade point average to get into most PA school courses. So keeping that in mind and understanding why I was doing those things helped out a lot as well. The last why we will talk about in regards to education is why I finished PA school. This is going to require a little bit of explanation, and it will also probably come up in other episodes as well. The motivation for going to PA school actually came after I lived in Uganda for several months in 2014. Prior to that, living in Uganda, I had gotten some experience with medicine in third world countries by going on mission trips. Now, the first of these mission trips that I went on was in 2010. I had recently become a follower of Christ. I started down that pathway at New Hope Church, and that was a particularly life-changing experience. New Hope Church is in Lorton, Virginia, and one day there was a lady there named Jenny Herzog who had a meeting to talk to us about a mission trip she'd gone on, I believe the year before, to Uganda, which is in Eastern Africa, and see if some of us were interested in doing that. I attended that meeting. A lot of times, I've mentioned before that I like to jump in with both feet in the deep end and see how deep the water goes. And that's what I was doing with this Christianity thing. So I went to the meeting. It sounded interesting. It actually sounded fun. So I decided I wanted to go on it. Now, that first trip to Uganda, I really had no idea what to expect. I did have some things rolling around in the back of my mind, which turned out to all be false assumptions. The things I had heard about Africa were things like all the tragedies in Somalia and the chaos there that was happening in the 90s and early 2000s. I also had in the front of my mind things like the crises that they had in Rwanda and the genocide there. Rwanda actually shares a border with Uganda. And, of course, there's all the stories about strange diseases like Ebola and other hemorrhagic fevers, also malaria. So lots of things to be concerned about there. When I was talking about going to Uganda, the woman I was dating at the time actually got extremely upset with me because she went down the path of Africa is unsafe. You're going to die if you go there. I figured, well, I always like an adventure, so let's go give it a shot. However, I did want to be prepared to walk out of wherever I was if I found the need to do so. And at the time, I actually bought a backpack, a Kelty Redwing 50. That is my favorite backpack. I still have it. It's still going strong here 15 years later. It's a nice size for packing because you can actually carry it onto a plane, get it into the overhead. And as long as you pack essentials and you understand lessons learned in life about how you can wear your pants more than one day in a row, wear your shirt more than one day in a row, and also know that you can rotate through clothes and wash the ones you have while you're wearing some other ones, you can fit 2 weeks worth of gear into that Kelty 50 backpack. Kelty's still making that backpack. It's a little bit different than the version I have, but I am sure it is still a great pack. And if you're looking for one, a backpack that is really good, check out that Kelty Redwing 50. I'll include a link in the show notes so you can go find what they've got as the current iteration. So I packed all of my gear so that if things got weird wherever it was that we were going, then I would be able to walk out of Uganda to someplace safe. And I've done some hiking and backpacking and things like that in my day, so I had no doubts in my mind that I was going to be able to accomplish that. Now, it turned out that when we got to Uganda, it was much different than I had anticipated. Everybody there seemed to be much more friendly than you're used to in the United States. It seemed to be a much safer area. I felt more safe there than I do in places such as New York City, certain parts of Washington, D.C., and parts of Chicago as well. There were also some fun recreational activities over there, like taking boat tours on the Nile. I found out later about whitewater rafting on the Nile with my friend Yassine in his Adrift camp. We'll talk about those in another episode. And also going on viewing safaris. Those are fun too. These are all things that I had no idea we were going to be able to do in Africa. Now, while on the mission trip, we were staying in a town called Tororo, which is in the southeast corner of Uganda near the Malaba River crossing over into Kenya. One morning, while we were all sitting at what they called family time, the group that I was with was Hope for Kids International. They're a very good group to do mission trips with. And they were talking about a medical outreach that was going to take place that day, and that you did not have to have any medical experience. They were taking all comers. That sounded interesting. I actually made friends with many of the providers that were working there. I made friends with a particular doctor, Amy Stone, who always encouraged me to get more training so I would be more valuable in mission work over there in Uganda and other places as well. The environment we got to, it was a brick building with no electricity. They set up some awnings outside, and there were hundreds of people that had come from I don't know how far away. But in areas like that, this might be that group of people's one chance in their entire life to get medical treatment of any kind. So it was super interesting to see this, and it motivated me to come back and get more training and be more useful to help with them. I began with my EMT that I got from Buckhall Volunteer Fire Department in Prince William County, Virginia. That later let me get sponsored by the Emirates Foundation with Emirates Airline and go back on another trip to Uganda and not have to fundraise for the airfare, which is not an insignificant cost. Now, fast forwarding to 2014, I went to Uganda and I actually lived over there for several months. I was working in clinics, this time with a group called Outreach for Africa. I hadn't met. I had heard about this woman. Her name's Evelyn Kumantali. We all call her Evie. And she lives in Fort Portal, Uganda, which is on the far western side. I actually sent her an email and said, hey, I've come over there, done some work on medical missions with Hope for Kids. Would you be interested in me coming over there for several months and working in some of the clinics you all sponsor? She said that was a great plan. We figured it out, and I went over there. I did lots of interesting work during that time. We'll talk about that in other episodes as well. I got to meet a few kings. I got to go to a few places that a lot of people don't ever get to go when they're in Africa. Rumor has it that I even got to go to one place where Caucasians have not been allowed to go for a long time. However, while I was there, I started to change what I was thinking about doing. So I came back and I was focused on possibly going to medical school. We'll talk about this more in another episode as well. But I had a group of guys that I called my advisory board at the time, and I ran that idea past them. One of the guys in that group, Bulldog Frazier, he's a great fellow. I really enjoy his advice. He actually suggested that I consider PA school instead of medical school. I told him, I'd rather just do the MD. I did end up having to apologize to Bulldog for kind of blowing that off and poo-pooing that idea, because I did also give my friend Dr. Amy Stone a call. And I said, Amy, this is what I'm thinking about doing. I'd like to go to medical school. And her response was, oh, that's a great idea. You'd probably be super good at going to medical school. You'd probably make a pretty good doc. But do you really want to start your practice in your 60s? Because that's what you're looking at, given how old you are and what it's going to take you to get doing that. Why don't you just go to PA school instead? That was some super solid advice she gave me. That's what I ended up doing. And I really appreciate that she took the time to give me that advice, because it really sharpened my path. Now, we'll talk about PA school. We talked a little bit about the prerequisite process. However, once you get in there, PA school is super challenging. The first semester, it's difficult, but it's not that difficult. But the process is they're basically pulling your brain out, dumping what doctors go to medical school 3 years to 4 years for, and sticking that in your brain in about a year and a half. And then you get another year of clinical rotations where you learn practical skills and things like that. When you start the second semester of PA school, it is just phenomenally difficult. if I remember correctly, my school, we did 36 credit hours. That is a lot of things to learn and try to retain all at once. During that semester, we took over 100 exams in the various topics we were learning. That's a lot of testing to study for. It is difficult. We only had one person, I believe, drop out of my class because they had some difficulties, but a lot of folks came in, they were in relationships, those relationships ended. My wife and I were married at the time. Obviously that relationship didn't end, but it was stressful. Nobody enjoyed things. I know Nancy a lot of times tells me, hey, remember such and such when we were living in Jacksonville? And I'm like, no, I don't remember that at all. And then she'll go, oh, that's right. That's when you were in PAs. However, I had to keep focused on my why I was there. I honestly felt like I was being called to be able to do medical mission work in Africa, and I'm still looking forward to getting back there once we get a few things resolved up here. So keeping that laser focus of being able to provide better for people, being able to help people, and being able to have a new and interesting career that really kept me motivated when some of the difficult times were there, when the classes were particularly challenging, when I had to go to rotations that were 6-8 hours away and live away from my wife for 10 weeks at a time. Keeping that why was very helpful in making sure that I was able to get through the difficulties of the PA school challenge. So we've talked a lot today about knowing why you're doing something and how that can keep you on track. If you keep your why forefront in your mind, you should be able to use that as a driving force to keep you going. Also, if you tell your friends and family your why, what you're doing, that will help them understand what you're doing. And if you start finding yourself in a position where you're thinking about abandoning the course you're on, they can always remind you of why you're doing it and possibly help keep you going. That's it for today's episode. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you putting up with me as I'm learning how to do this podcast and giving me feedback on what you like, what you don't. I look forward to hearing from you in email or in comment sections on where you're listening to these podcasts. Tune in next time for the episode on PA school, where we're going to talk about what it looks like getting into PA school. And we'll talk about the application process and some of the resources. I believe that I may also be getting the admissions coordinator from my PA school, Nova Southeastern University, on here to talk to us a little bit about that as well. But I'll save introducing her for that episode once we've gotten that firmed up. Thanks again.
Nancy is getting into this, being able to add her commentary to the podcast. She doesn't want to come on camera this time. She just wants to be heard. But now, so Nancy, what do you have? Any thoughts on that discussion about knowing your why and how it gets you through stuff that's challenging?
Well, you shouldn't do anything unless you know your purpose. And everybody has a purpose in life. And I also wanted to say, I'm changing the subject a little here. Did you say your next podcast is about PA school?
It is.
Yeah, I think you need to do that one with me.
We'll see. We might do that. You might have to buy your own microphone and stuff to do that.
Oh, well, my birthday's coming up, so that'd be a great gift.
I haven't worked since October. Haven't worked in about 2.5 months.
You can get it on Amazon for cheap.
Not that cheap. Did you have anything else you wanted to add,
I did
dear?
not. That was it.
Okay.
The background music Perspectives was created by Kevin McLeod at incompetech.com. It is licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. The website from which the music was downloaded is http://creativecommons.org/. mariner.org/licenses/by/4.0. Thank you for listening to Medical Mariner Inc. Medical Mariner Inc. is written, produced, and hosted by me, Paul Stewart. If you wish to make suggestions for content, leave me some comments, or have anything you would like for me to know, you can email me at medicalmarinerinc@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. To support the show, please give me a 5-star rating on whatever platform you listen on, like, and subscribe to the show. Thanks, and I hope you have a good day.